Hey everyone, good morning. Make sure your cameras are on, please. Marta, you're funny. All right. All right, everyone, cameras on, please. Sanam, good morning. All right, got it. All right. Sanam, you're very welcome. Any questions you have, you can always post on the YouTube chat as we go. All right. Zoomers, are you ready? I got YouTubers ready, 2 people watching. You guys ready or what? No? Juan's like, no. Snow's coming. All right, guys. So let's give this a try. Let's see how it goes. We have 2 chapters today. We have chapter 27, New Jersey Agency and Business Practices. And then we're going to briefly talk about New Jersey contracts. Contract law, we had 2 chapters on contract law and 1 on contracts for real estate. The New Jersey portion is only like 8 pages, just a few little things that are more particular to New Jersey real estate. All right. Okay, and I have a Shuggy Shug. Okay, that's a great username. All right, Boston in the house. There you go. Cool. So Boston. This is the New Jersey portion. So I don't know if you're getting the New Jersey license, if it applies to you or not. This is the New Jersey portion. We already did the national portion. But anyway, any questions? You guys, like I said, always free to chime in. All right, so New Jersey Agency of Business Practices. So when it comes to Agency of Business Practices, we had already like 4 chapters about it because it's heavily tested in the national exam. So whether it's state or national, heavily tested, right? I've asked 1 billion times, what does this word mean? So I'm going to ask 1,000,000,001. Good morning, everyone. Could you please tell me what agency means? Don't you all answer at the same time? Okay. No, it's early. Tiana's still rubbing her eyes like, come on, I just rolled out of bed. I totally understood that, yeah. Are you didn't sleep? That's what it is? Oh, no contact, so you can't hear me. Okay. Guys, it's a simple question. Agency. You guys got to know this stuff. What does agency mean? Karine Campbell says brokerage or business. Kinda. An agency, right, does not necessarily mean brokerage. Okay? Does not necessarily mean brokerage. It means something else first. Because a brokerage is just a company that happens to mediate transactions. The word agency. All right, Danny for the win. And the answer from Danny, agency means employer, employee relationship. Okay? So agency means employer-employee relationship. And guys, so YouTubers and Zoomers, here's the thing. If I'm not hired, right, I'm a real estate salesperson. I'm not a real estate agent, right? Because if I'm not hired by anyone, if I'm not hired by the seller to represent them, if I'm not hired by the buyer to represent them, then I'm a salesperson. I can operate as a transaction broker where I don't represent either one of them. The word agency means somebody hired you. There's an employer, and the employer could be the seller. Therefore, you are agent of the seller. This is key. This is from the national portion. This is key that you guys know for the state exam. Okay? So real estate agency, if somebody says real estate agency, right? The correct term is real estate brokerage. Because agency only occurs when somebody hires you. Okay? Agency is when you become an agent and represent someone. So agency is representation. So we're going to talk about agency relationships. Again, this is key that everybody knows. Right? So guys, you're going to suffer. Snowy day. You're going to suffer. Please tell me, what types of business relationships do you guys know? Or agency relationships you guys know? Types of agency. Without reading, you should know by now. And it's like, I was flipping pages, but I stopped right here. Sam, I don't even know what to answer. Isn't it too early? You wake up and that's it? That's what you go for? Tiana said yes. That's my day, 24/7. All right, Yanitza, very good. You could be the seller's agent. She just reversed it. You could be the buyer's agent. And there's another one. I definitely understood Sam, right? But it's so easy to pick on. Please, Tiana, come on. You got a baby. You could be a transaction broker. Transaction broker, Danny, not a transaction agent. Because agent means you got hired. So broker, right? You're brokering the deal, but without representation. You represent the transaction only. You're not an agent. Okay? And then, I'm sorry, guys. The dual here, I don't know what that is. I have no idea what dual means. Can anybody tell me? It's actually disclosed. Pretty good though. Disclosed dual agents. Dual agency by itself is illegal. Has to be disclosed dual agent. That means that everybody knows. All right. Karine did write this. He wrote buyers, sellers, disclosed dual, and transaction. Perfect. So these are the types of business relationships we can enter into. Can anybody tell me in the chat right now how many times I've asked the same question about the agency relationship? How many times have I asked the same? A lot, right, Tiana? A lot. Maybe important? For Danny, the most important thing right now is changing backgrounds, for instance. Like, yeah, we got this. We're good. I'll pass the exam on Saturday. Let me change backgrounds. I'm out there, out of space. All right, so types of agency. Buyer's agency. You represent the buyer only. So it's a single agency where you represent the buyer only. seller's agency. You represent the seller only. So your duties, when you represent one or the other, right? Agency, one or the other, you represent, that means one or the other hired you. Therefore, they are first. And you have fiduciary duties to these people. Does anybody remember what fiduciary duties we have? What fiduciary duties do we have? Sanam, I hope so. All right, Sam wrote loyalty. Danny just wrote cold. Thank you, cold. What does that mean? What is cold? I love that you know the acronym, but what is it? So Yanitza, care, obedience, loyalty, what else? Accounting, one more. One more, the core ones. Disclosure, very good. Juan, I see you're back. Okay, so I guess internet went down. All right, so care, obedience, accounting, loyalty, and disclosure. You must care so much for your clients that they are first. You must care so much for your client that you obey their lawful instructions. You must care so much for your client that you hold proper accounting. Care so much for your client that you're loyal to them. You will not pass along information that will endanger their position, their negotiating position. You must care so much for your client that you will disclose anything and everything that could affect the proposed transaction. So in the state exam, it's heavily tested, right? It's heavily tested, the representation. Who do you represent, right? There's a lot of questions, a lot of scenarios, okay? Yeah, Tiana didn't write love today. I don't know, surprising. Must have been the joint. All right, so next, we have disclosed to agents. Guys, again, it's very, very important. You can represent one side without representing the other. But if you represent both sides, then it must be in writing. There has to be written consent from both parties before you can move forward. So for you to represent both sides, and the reason being is, again, for a seller's agent, you represent the seller only. For the buyer's agent, you represent the buyers only. But when you represent both, which side are you going to pull? And you can't. You have to be impartial. So therefore, you got to have a disclosure and written consent where they say, yeah, it's okay, represent the buyer. And the buyer says, yeah, it's okay, represent the seller, and not a problem, okay? So written consent, remember that. It has to be, this is the key word here, disclosed dual agents, right? Every time, I pick on you guys all the time when you write dual. Right, great. Representing both is great, but you're making money, so there's a conflict of interest or potential conflict of interest. The seller and the buyer are entitled to know that you represent both. A bunch of scenarios in the state exam regarding this. It's one of the most heavily tested things. All right? Transaction broker. Okay. Remember, so Karine and Sanam, you guys wrote business, right? So, got to remember this. There's a type of relationship that's not an agency, because what is agency? That means somebody hired you. When we have transaction broker, we don't represent anyone. We mediate or we assist in the completion of the transaction, that's all. I don't represent the seller, so I don't pull more towards the seller's side. I don't represent the buyer, so I don't pull more towards the buyer's side. Mr. Seller, Mrs. Buyer, or vice versa, listen, I'm just helping you out. I know how to go from transaction from point A to point B, and I'll help you along the way. But I don't represent you, I'm just facilitating, right, the process. So transaction broker, what they do is facilitate the process. They do not represent anyone. So, not an agency, no representation. Not an agency. Transaction broker is not an agency. There's no representation. You guys gotta remember these four. Gotta. So many questions in the state exam regarding this. Okay, there's a possibility where you represent the seller, right? That means you're a listing agent, and then the buyer walks in an open house, who do you represent? If the buyer says, hey, I want to buy this house, who do you represent? So you have to think about it. If the question does not specifically state that you became an agent for the buyer or the buyer hired you, if the question does not specifically state that, right? Then for the seller, you're the listing agent or seller's agent. For the buyer, you're a transaction broker because the buyer is simply a customer. It's the difference between being a client and a customer, right? Transaction broker, they're all customers. They're not clients. You got to treat them fair and honestly, if you guys remember that, okay? So I don't put, as a transaction broker, the licensee does not owe either party the duty of putting his or her interest ahead of another party's interest, okay? In the transaction brokerage, the broker, primarily a manager of a transaction, just assisting the parties. I could be transaction broker for one, for the other, or for both, but I don't represent them. I just, again, manage or facilitate. You guys good? Okay. All right, in the state of New Jersey, we have something called CIS. Okay, every state has some type of disclosure about agency relationship. State of New Jersey, that disclosure is called Consumer Information Statement, or CIS. So, what I need you to understand is that the CIS is just a notice, also called disclosure, because that's what notice is, disclosure. It's not a contract. The CIS is not a contract. The CIS is merely a disclosure, right? So the CIS is a document that we're going to present to the buyer or to the seller, to the landlord or to the tenant that explains that could be a seller's agent, buyer's agent, disclosure agent, or a transaction broker, right? So the CIS explains the types of business relationships we can enter into, right? And the duties that are associated with it. It's not a contract. Because Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you're not hiring me yet. I'm just letting you know up front that if you do provide information, I might use that information, right, to get the transaction done. Right? So we have to be fair and honest when you represent somebody by disclosing. State of New Jersey requires that you present this or provide this to all the sellers, buyers, landlords, and tenants on 1 to 4 family residence and single vacant lots. So pretty much residential transactions require, write this down somewhere, residential transactions require that we disclose the CIS. And what is the CIS again? It's a notice of business relationship. Disclosure of business relationship. Seller's agent, buyer's agent, disclosure agent, or transaction broker. So represent the seller, represent the buyer, represent both, or represent neither. Simple as that. Okay? Next page. And this is so important right here. This is very, very, very important. You are required to provide the CIS at the first contact with a customer, because they're not your client yet. But at the first contact. That means when somebody calls you and say, hey, Bruno, I want to buy a house. I'm like, okay, hold up right there. Thank you for thinking of me. I just have to disclose a few things that are mandated by the state of New Jersey. And then you disclose, right? If they say they want to sell a house, same thing. Now, most realtors don't do this. Most salespeople, broker salespeople, what they do It's like, hey, I want to buy a house. Great. How many units? Are you approved? How much money you got? They start already with qualifying questions, right? But you can't. State of New Jersey requires that you disclose your business relationships before anything else or potential. Because again, anything you say can and will be used against you or for you in this transaction. So it's like the Miranda rights. The CIS is the Miranda rights for real estate. Okay? Saneda, you said I lost you. I still see you. Right there. You're not on vacation anymore, so you're back. Where did I lose you? Let me know. What's your question? Question? I said the CIS is a contract? No. I said the CIS is not a contract. CIS is a disclosure only. It's a notice. It's, I'm letting you know, Suneti, that if you want to hire me, this is what you can expect, right? If you want to not hire me and just have me help you, then this is what you can expect. If in the future, the other party, let's say you're the seller, the other party, the buyer, is somebody that I found, not another agent, it was me, this is what you could expect. So it's a disclosure. Okay? Not a contract. The reason I'm trying to make it as clear that it's not a contract is because nobody's bound to anything at that time. Okay? Good? Any questions? Yes, no, maybe? Sorry. All right, so we're good with that. All right, guys, I highly recommend that you guys go to this website right here on your page, or just Google New Jersey CIS. Make sure you get a copy of it because you need to use that for the rest of your realtor life. As long as you are a real estate salesperson in New Jersey, every single transaction must start with the CIS. Okay? If you contact somebody over the phone, the next time you sit down, you will have to make sure that they sign and acknowledge the CIS, because they have to be aware of the types of relationships and fiduciary duties or not that they can expect. All right. You guys already know this from chapter 11, but we're going to repeat it. An agency is the legal relationship created when the broker and the client agree to have the broker represent the client when dealing with third parties. The broker is referred to as the agent, and the client is the principal, because you represent. If you don't represent, then they're not the client, they're not the principal. They are customers. Okay? Now, agency is created by a contractual agreement between the broker and the client, not by who pays the commission. So guys, the seller is the one that pays you. Who do you represent? Let me know in the chat. The seller is the one that pays you. Who do you represent? The seller is the one that pays you. Who do you represent? YouTubers, who do you represent? Zoomers, who do you represent? Okay, Yanitza said the buyer. Okay. Kiana's like, I want to answer, but I'm waiting for more people to answer, so mine doesn't sound that bad. You don't have your contact, so you couldn't hear me. I got it. I understood that. Okay, now you have them? Okay, great. So the question was, the seller pays your commission. Who hired you? The seller pays your commission. Who hired you? Seller pays your commission. Who hired you? I'm waiting. Got 2 people watching on YouTube, so I'm waiting for those answers as well. Got you guys putting answers, hopefully. Okay. You know I always have fun with the answers, right? All right, so let's look at these answers. Yanita said buyer. Okay. Tiana said the buyer. Alexa says buyer. And then Orphelia and Danny said broker. This is always the perfect answer. Who pays you? Not the seller, the broker. Well, let's assume my question is different. Hey Ruth, good morning. I was just asking, the seller pays you, so who do you represent, right? So the seller, first of all, pays the broker. You as an agent represent the broker, so you get paid by the broker. But my question is, who do you represent in this transaction? Okay? And nobody gave me the answer yet. Who do you represent in this transaction? See, you are an extension of the broker. I get it. But who do you represent? Or who does your broker represent then, if that's the question? Okay? Seller? So the seller pays you, right? Or your broker, so that means you represent seller. Or you and your broker represent the seller. That's what you're telling me. The agency. What agency? What is agency, guys? You represent yourself. Sure. Okay. All right. Ruth wrote the seller or buyer. So, Ruth, why? Let me know. Represent yourself. That's awesome. Hey, Millie. Good morning. So why, Ruth, why did you write the seller or buyer? Let's educate everybody here and see why the seller, but why not ourselves, right? Why not I don't even know why agency is there, right? You rep whoever your client is. So how do we define who your client is? How do you define who your client is? It's not who pays you? Not the seller? CIS is not a contract. This is the reason why I do this, because in the exam, they're going to trick you. I already have one right answer here, so I just want to make sure you guys develop on it. Ruth, perfect. Thank you, perfect. That's it. I'm not going to tell you guys the answer yet. Seller pays. So who do you represent? I'm just not going to give you the answer yet, okay? The seller pays. Who do you represent? Anyone else? Leonard says, nobody. Just give me my money. I like that one. Nobody. Give me my money. I don't care who I represent. Just give me money. Okay. So let me run with this. Ready? Whoever pays you really does not matter. The representation is based on whoever hired you. Okay? So representation is based on a contractual agreement. There's only two people that answered correctly. Well, kind of three people that answered correctly. And then on YouTube, we got only one person that answered correctly. But this is very, very important you guys understand that, let's say I represent the buyer. 99% of the times, the seller agreed to pay the buyer's broker. You understand? So 99% of the times, the seller agreed to pay the buyer's broker. So does that mean that my first duty is to the seller because they're the ones paying? No. You represent whoever hired you, not who pays you. You will get paid in the transaction, regardless of you representing the seller or representing the buyer. The representation is based on the agency agreement, which is the employer-employee agreement, where you agree to be hired, right? And the seller or the buyer agreed to hire you. You guys got it? Right? But Clenard, it could have been nobody. Because as a transaction broker, you still get paid. And you don't represent anyone. They're customers, they're not clients. Right? Are you guys understanding this? Any questions? Questions? Okay. Agency, which is employer-employee relationship, is based on a contractual agreement. It's not based on who paid you. Okay, so if seller pays, but you represent the buyer, if seller pays, but you represent the buyer is your client. Got to have that very clear. Juan says, having internet issues. Yeah, no. At my house this morning, I was having internet issues too. So the kids cannot get into school. All right. New Jersey allows agency agreement to be established through one of the following means: either expressed, which is oral or written, called contractual authority; implied, that means your actions show or indicate or imply that you are representing the seller or representing the buyer or landlord or tenant, whatever. So it's based on actions. Or the level extent of authority that the public can safely assume that the agent has. This is called apparent authority. So it appears like you do. Okay? Talked about this. Forwards. Disclosure duties. Guys, what do we have to disclose? I'm using this as reviews, as you guys know. What do we have to disclose? What are the disclosure requirements? What are disclosure requirements? What are things that we need to disclose? A lot of questions, guys. This is reviews before the exam. That's what I use the New Jersey portion for, or the state portion for. What are we required to disclose? Juan says everything. Not everything. What we got? Tiana says closing costs. That's RESPA, not us. What are we as salespeople required to disclose? And Sanady gave the correct answer right here. Nope. Guys, stop. What do we have to disclose? For the win. Everything that can affect the sale. Anything that can affect the sale, we must disclose. The type of representation could affect the sale, but any material fact or potential conflicts of interest must be disclosed. The property condition must be disclosed. We cannot hide the fact that there's mold in the basement, right? We have to disclose, right? Very, very important. The fact that the buyer does not have money, we have to disclose. Ruth said, dang it, I was going to say that. Some people are too fast, too furious. That's how it is. All right, so what do we have to disclose? As we discussed in Chapter 26, the Jersey Real Estate Sales Full Disclosure Act regulates marketing and sale of specified types of out-of-state property or interstate properties. The Act provides the following protections for the buyers, right? So if it's an interstate property or out-of-state property, as we mentioned yesterday, they have to file what's called a public offering statement, right? So that the New Jersey residents know that the property is out of state and what rights they have, including a 7-day calendar rescission, that there's going to be a secure third-party escrow account for all the buyers' deposits, right? Developers' financial assurances provided to the commission, showing that the developer is financially able to complete all the work as promised, right? Establishment of the Bureau of Subdivided Land Sales Control to be responsible for administration of the Act, and registration with that bureau prior to marketing to New Jersey residents. Also, designation of a New Jersey licensed broker as broker of record, and standards for all types of advertising. Now, material facts, what is that? Because that's the things we must disclose. What is a material fact? Well, just like Sine said, right? It's a piece of information, right? Defined as something that, if known, might have caused the buyer or the seller to make a different decision about entering into a sales contract or rental contract. The information is important, significant, or essential to a reasonable person when making a decision. It may be information that the agent knows or suspects that the buyer would consider important or significant. So what we're saying here is that anything and everything that could affect the proposed transaction must be disclosed. If known about it, the buyer could have taken a different stance, or if known about it, the seller could have taken a different stance or negotiation, then it is something that must have been disclosed. New Jersey regulations require you, the licensee, to make reasonable efforts to obtain all material information about a physical condition of the property. Making reasonable efforts would include asking the seller or the seller's agent about the property's physical condition and performing a visual inspection of the property to look for easily seen physical conditions that may be considered material. So our job, guys, very simple. Our job is to ask a bunch of questions to whoever is the expert in the matter. The seller is the one that knows the condition of the house better than anyone. The inspector is the one that will review the condition of the house better than anyone. Our job is to ask a bunch of questions. Our second job is to do a visual inspection. If it's apparent, if we can see, oh my God, there's a leak over here, right? If we can see it, right? See something, say something. It's a simple concept. You see something, say something. Snitch, it's okay. This time is okay. All right? That's it. You see something, say something. Now, the licensee must then disclose any discovered or discoverable defects to the buyer, and if a reasonable inspection could discover the defect, then the licensee must disclose. So what is a reasonable inspection is what we can see. For instance, water leakage in the basement, mold inside the living structure, and cracks in the structure foundation. These are visible, so must be disclosed. What we are not required to disclose, ready? Pay attention, because Juan, you said everything, right? There's some stuff we're not required and some stuff we shouldn't disclose at all. For instance, social conditions or psychological impairments. Social conditions or psychological impairments. So, social conditions, noisy neighbors, loud parties, barking dogs, etc. How does that affect the physical structure of the property? because the value is the structure, right? Noisy neighbors, they're there now. What about tomorrow? They might move, but the house is still there. The house has its value, not the neighbors. Okay? So we are not required to disclose social conditions. Psychological impairments include suicide or murder on the property. What did I do? All right, murder on the property, police activity on the property, haunting of the property, etc. These are psychological. Why psychological? Because everybody's affected differently. Some people will be like, okay, it's normal. Everybody dies. It happened. Whatever. Ghosts, it's just the wood creaking. Other people will be like, no, no, no. I'm not buying. I'm not buying because of this or because of that, right? But a physical condition, so psychological and social. Psychological and social. Everybody has a different stance on that. But a physical condition, if the wall is damaged, then the wall is damaged. It affects everybody. You guys understand? This is the difference. Anything that could affect the transaction must be disclosed. Everything where people take different stances, like social or psychological conditions, do not affect the physical condition, so do not need to be disclosed. Got it? Thumbs up? Okay. However, if a buyer specifically asks about any of these conditions, the agent must answer honestly. So if you know, disclose. If you don't know, you're not required to research. Did somebody die on the property? I don't know. Right? You're not required to research. It's not part of your job description. Right? Is there any damage to the house? I'll find out. You guys understand? That's the difference. All right. Another thing. Sellers are required to disclose latent defects. What are latent defects? Latent defects are hidden defects. It's something that's not apparent, something that you cannot see right away, something that the seller knows but fails to disclose in order to get the transaction through, right? So latent defects, something that you'll find out, think about this, something that you'll find out later. Okay, latent defects. You'll find out later. Sanam, you're welcome. Okay. The thing about latent defects, you got to talk to the seller and say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you got to tell me everything about the property. Here's the thing. If you don't tell me now, right, and the buyer buys without knowing the defect, they have up to, and we'll talk about this later, they have up to 6 years to sue you in the transaction. Up to 6 years to sue you in the transaction. So if a year later, you think like, hey, it's out of my hands, I don't have to worry about it, I'm already living somewhere else, right? Mr. or Mrs. Seller, you could still have a lawsuit against you. Okay? A year later, 2 years later, 3 years later, up to 6 years, they can sue you for something that was hidden. That you knew about it, but you did not disclose. All right, so sellers are required to present all facts about the property. Failure to disclose such a latent defect could result in the buyer rescinding the sales contract and or the seller becoming financially liable for damages caused by that defect. Okay? All right, next. You guys know, you ever heard of this? Have you? Yes, no, maybe? Okay, Carfax. Now, what is Carfax for? The weirdest thing. This is like the weirdest thing. A fax is something that it's a facsimile, right? Something that you fax over, right? Yet, the the mascot is a fox, right? But facts is because of facts. Weirdest thing. You look at a fox talking about facts, but it's actually facts. Weirdest thing. And I was just waiting for that. Okay, Tiana, perfect. And Danny, perfect. It's the history of the car. Great. But what kind of history? What does it tell us? So yes, it is the history of the car, but what does it tell us? What history? Who owned it? Okay. It will say that as well. Yep. Service. Perfect. And also potential. Also potential. Right, TMU. I know TMI. Any damages or accidents, says Alexis. Great. All right, perfect. So the Carfax will tell you any accidents or claims against the car, right? It tells you who the current owner is. True mileage unknown. Okay, got it. It tells you who the owner is. It tells you, so it pulls all that information. Estimated mileage based on whatever last reported, right? And it also tells you if there's potential accidents or claims against the property, because that's what Carfax does. Now, for houses, we also have a report. Does anybody have an idea what it is? We have Carfax for cars. What about for houses? Do you have an idea? Anybody? Some of you got the face like, Bruno, you're asking too many questions today. I know, it's called a review. Anybody has any idea or no? No clue? Are you Googling it? You don't have to Google. The question was, we got Carfax, which is the claims for cars, so know the records of claims for cars. And now I'm asking if you guys know what is the name for the one for houses. Any clue? Any idea? Bernard says house facts. Zanetti as well. Okay. That would be a good one. But no. You guys have no clue? The Carfax equivalent for houses is called CLUE. And CLUE is the Comprehensive Loss Underwriting Exchange. So if you have no clue what to answer, all right, Sugar, you wrote abstract title. That's for a title search. We're talking about insurance claims or accidents, right? This is a national, national database, right, of insurance claims. It's called Comprehensive Loss Underwriting Exchange. It's provided by ChoicePoint, which is the database. It doesn't show here, but it's ChoicePoint, right? And what you wrote again, Sugar, was the title search to know who's the owner, but it does not show claims against the property. The CLUE report, very similar to Carfax, shows the claims, insurance claims made on the properties within the past 5 years. So before you can buy a house, you have to insure it, right? So the insurance company that's going to insure your house, they will pull this report to figure out if there's any insurance claims and figure out what the premium might be. Sam, you're getting here with that Starbucks? Is that what it is? Bringing some Starbucks? Oh, Duncan. Traitor. Traitor. That's what it is. All right. So, next thing we got is disclosure to seller. Oh, actually, hold on. Let me go back. Let me go back here. The question in the state exam, if you have that question, would be, so let me go back to this. The question would be, where can we find, something like this, where can we find any insurance claims that might have happened to the property within the past 5 years, all right? So that's what it is. Where can you find any insurance claims that happened against the property within the past 5 years, all right? And they're going to have two answers. So this is just to show, what do you call it? This is just to show how tricky the exam can be sometimes, right? There's two potential answers. They are very similar. It's just that one says comprehensive loss underwriting exchange, and the other one might say, instead of underwriting, might say insurance, right? So comprehensive loss insurance exchange, because it's a database, so it's an exchange for insurance purposes. In your mind, usually what happens is the question is about insurance claims, right? Therefore, the correct answer would be whatever says insurance, correct? Well, no. It's whatever says underwriting, right? So you're going to have two that are very similar. One says comprehensive loss underwriting. The other one says comprehensive loss insurance. But underwriting is a risk assessment. Okay? So underwriting is a risk assessment. If we're trying to figure out the damages to the property, right? It's because we're going to underwrite, or we're going to assess the risk of insuring this property. So the correct answer is whatever says underwriting. Or look for the acronym CLUE. Okay? CLE doesn't sound right. Comprehensive loss insurance exchange. Doesn't sound right. Does that make sense? It doesn't sound right. So look for the acronym that sounds great. CLUE. I have no clue, so give me a clue. What is the clue? It's the underwriting exchange. Okay? Sam, you only drink Starbucks with me? Seriously. And then you go to Dunkin' Donuts? So next time, that's it. Dunking with you. All right. Disclosures to the seller. Next page. The listing agent has certain disclosure responsibilities to the seller. The listing agent has certain disclosure responsibilities to the seller. And these include disclosure of the agency relationship upon first contact with the customer, including providing the CIS, which you guys already know. The agent should also ascertain if there's a need for a CO, certificate of occupancy, at the time that the title is transferred. Something that a lot of agents do only at the end, right? The agent also has the responsibility of disclosing his or her duties to the seller, which are included in the listing agreements. And if the agent is offering a rebate to the buyer, then the agent must disclose also the fact to the seller. If the seller, come on in. All right. I don't get Starbucks, but I get Mario Bucks.
Yes.
The best coffee in the Ironbound. Mario Bucks. There you go. Thanks, my man. Appreciate it. All right. You're not leaving, are you? Okay, great. All right, so Sam, where are you? There you are. Okay. Dunkin' Donuts has nothing on this. Same. Go ahead and have your Dunkin'. All right. Right here, if the seller's agent becomes aware, this is a potential question in the state exam as well, by the way. It's something to this effect. If you become aware of any material information regarding the buyer, for instance, the buyer's inability to acquire financing. I mentioned this before in the previous chapter. right? I actually give you an example of my cousin. The buyer was approved, and then all of a sudden, not approved, right? So what did the buyer's agent do? Absolutely nothing. They waited until last minute, until the closing dates, to say, sorry, we're not closing. Like, are you kidding me? Last minute? See, the seller needs to know that they need to potentially look for other opportunities or other buyers. They need to know what the situation is to consider if they will continue waiting for the buyer, or should they move somewhere else. So we have to disclose, and this is a potential question in the exam. We have to disclose, if we represent the seller, we have to disclose that the buyer cannot buy. That's agency responsible. That's material information. Also, to the seller, we must present all offers. Let me go here real quick. Do you see this? If somebody offers $1 for the house, you still have to present. Guys, we cannot accept offers. We cannot. I mentioned this yesterday. I think Sanam was asking this question yesterday. We cannot present offers. Okay? I mean, we cannot accept offers. We have to present them all, and the seller is the one that decides. So, again, we cannot discard offers without presenting them to the seller. It's not up to us. Ever. You got it? Let me just correct one thing that's missing here. There's one thing missing here I want you guys to correct. All written offers. Okay, that's the only thing that needs to be corrected here, is all written offers. And why? Why all written offers? Why not verbal offers? Because look, your listing says 300,000, right? My buyer shows up and says, I want to give $500,000. I'm going to call you up and say, hey, listing agent, Juan, $500,000 for that $300,000 listing. Now, Juan's going to get all excited because his commission just almost doubled, right? He's going to, all right, let's do this, right? He gets all excited, like a little dog starts wagging the tail. Come on, let's do this. We got to do this. $500,000 instead of $300,000. This is amazing. Let's do this. I'm happy. And the first thing he does, especially new, and I'm not saying wagging the tail, because that's what the baby puppies do. Right? The first thing he does when he starts this business is, I got a $500,000 offer, $200,000 above asking price. Mr. Seller or Mrs. Seller, I'm the king of real estate. I got you almost double the amount. Right? And you're all happy. And your seller does the same thing, starts getting all excited. Yeah, amazing, let's do this. And that offer never comes through. Guys, you get a written offer. Tell them to put it in writing, period. They could have offered $1 million. They could have offered $10 million, right? If it's not in writing, it does not exist. Okay, so you must present all the offers that are in writing. Okay? Then everybody can wag their tails and be all excited once it's in writing. Okay? Now it's almost a solid offer. Almost. The only other thing that's missing here, that's not a requirement, but you should make sure that your seller understands that all offers should come with a pre-approval, right? There's nothing here, and there's nothing in the law that says has to come with a pre-approval. No, there's nothing in the law that says that. You are required to investigate the financial ability of the buyer, but you're not required to ask for it unless the seller demands it. So usually when you talk to the sellers, you should tell them also, hey, let's put in the agreement that we only accept offers that are accompanied by a pre-approval. Show me the money, right? Once you have the offer and the money, now you're 90% guaranteed that's going to close. 90%. There's still the 10% of property not appraising. There's still the potential of the home inspection showing defects in the property that are not worth the transaction, right? And there's always the potential that the buyer will screw up by using credit, like credit cards, buying a car, or losing their job. So that's the 10% variable for the transaction. Okay? So we must present all written offers, and it's immediately. Immediately. State of New Jersey deems that immediately is within 24 hours. Okay? So any offer that comes through you, written offer comes through you, you have 24 hours to submit the offer to the seller. Okay? When the seller's agent investigates the property, he or she is required by the commission regulations to disclose the resulting information to all prospective buyers. Now, again, this is a question in the state exam. Something very similar to this. They say, John, the seller's agent or the listing agent, seller's agent or listing agent, therefore they represent who? The seller, right? And then they're going to tell you that there's an issue with the property in the question. There's an issue with the property. And then what must you do to the buyer? The answer is you still have to disclose. You still have to disclose the information to the buyer. It's a material fact. If it's a material fact that could affect the transaction, it does not matter who you represent. If it's a material fact, it does not matter who you represent. The buyer must still know that there's an issue with the property. There's mold in the basement. You as the seller's agent know this. You still must tell the buyer, the customer, that you don't represent. You still must disclose to them, hey, look, just to be fair and honest, there's mold in the basement. Okay? Gotta remember this. Right? We talked about the duties. There's the duties to all customers and duties to the seller, to the clients. To all customers, we got to treat them fairly and honestly. You represent the seller, not the buyer. Treat them fairly and honestly. There's a certain degree of care and disclosure. So you still have to disclose certain things. Again, material information. All right, that's all the stuff that's here. All right, the next thing we have in New Jersey is, oh, hold on a second. Got a question here from Sam. What if it says broker knows, but he doesn't tell you, and the seller only tells the broker? Okay. You are the buyer? You're in the dark, so I can barely see you. You are the buyer? That's what I'm assuming from what you're writing here. Agents. I'm a little lost on this one. You guys do understand. So before you say that, okay. So okay, so the broker, okay, so let's say you're friends with Pedro, right? And you don't tell me the issue with the property, but you told him, right? I'm the one representing you, but technically, since he's the broker, he's the one representing you. But that information was never told to me, the agent. Here's the thing. Here's the thing. Any information that was given to the principal, it was given to the agent. Any information given to the agent was given to the principal. So me knowing or not knowing does not limit my liability as an agent for the client, right? Does not limit my liability for agent or client. I should have known. Now the broker will be dragged into a potential lawsuit as well because the broker did know. Okay? You cannot hide stuff, right? You might not have the full information, but you cannot hide stuff from the parties that are involved in the transaction. So as agent and broker, right? Either one or all of them, their license could be affected by something that was not disclosed. All right. Next, we got off-site conditions. What does off-site mean, guys? Off-site. Sure, I agree with that, Tiana. But she did. I don't know. I know what you said. I'm just waiting for you to type. I got that. Okay. Hold on. Let me correct this. Not on your property. So it's off-site. Right? So this is my piece of property right here. This is mine. Okay? And then here there's a gas station. Okay? So the gas station is not on my property. Right? It's not on my property, but it could affect my property. So off-site conditions is stuff, like Danny wrote, surrounding, right? Is stuff that's not on your property, but it kind of like surrounds your property and could affect your property. So what we're saying with off-site conditions is that this could also be material facts that must be disclosed. For instance, environmental hazard discharge sites, electrical transformer substations and overhead utility transmission lines conducting 240,000 volts or more, underground gas transmission. You don't have to know these. You just have to understand the dangers of these, right? You have to understand the dangers. So you understand that off-site conditions are stuff that still must be disclosed to a potential buyer. Now, New Jersey created the new Residential Construction Off-Site Conditions Disclosure Act. And with this act comes two things: new constructions and resale properties. So off-site conditions is stuff that's not on your property but could affect your property. If it's a new construction, then we are required to provide a disclosure or notice of potential off-site conditions and 5 business days for the buyer to walk away. So all this must be disclosed within 5 business days and give an opportunity for the buyer to walk away. Okay? Because it's a new construction and there's a hazardous site around. Resale properties do not include the same 5-day. So pretty much, I knock a house down, I make a brand new house, nobody has ever lived there before, I must disclose. Hey, there's a hazardous waste dumping site half mile up. Okay? If it's a resale, that means a house that already exists, people have lived there, right? I think the way they take it is, hey, if they can live there, so can you. So there's no requirement for us to cancel. New constructions, you have to give 5 business days for them to cancel the contract. So allow them 5 business days to cancel the contract. Resale, nope. Resale does not have that condition. All right, guys, Consumer Fraud Act. This is very simple. We already talked about this several times in advertisement. We talked about misrepresentation. We talked about deliberate fraud, right? Consumer Fraud Act from New Jersey is the same thing. Any false advertisement, right? Any false advertisement could make you liable for any loss. I'm going to go right through this. There's 3 types of consumer fraud. That's affirmative misrepresentation, knowing omission, and law violation, right? And that will bring you to penalties of up to $10,000 for first offense, $20,000 for second offense, and each subsequent offense. In addition, you might be required to pay 3 times the amount of the damages awarded to the injured party and also the attorney and other legal fees. Failure to pay the civil penalty could result in arrest. Now, how can we avoid? This is what we want to know. We don't want to know fraud. We want to know how to avoid the liability, right? Anybody wants to know how to avoid getting sued and getting arrested? Right, of course. Easy. If you can prove that you did not know that the information provided, again, keyword provided, was false or deceptive. So if the home inspector told you, hey, there's no damage to the property, right? Who's the expert here? Is it me or the home inspector? If the seller says the roof is 1 year old, it's a brand new roof, but it's falling apart, right? It's not my responsibility as an agent to go up to the roof and inspect the roof. It's not up to us to do that, right? And it's impossible from the ground to look up and say, you sure it's 1 year old? It looks like it's 30. It's about to die, right? Some roofs, it's impossible for us to see the condition without going up there. It's not our responsibility. So if somebody provided info to us, we were relying on the expert or the person that has firsthand knowledge. Okay, so if we can prove that, we might be able to avoid liability. The next one is we made a diligent effort to ascertain the truth. What does that mean? We asked questions. We did what we needed to do, which is ask questions. And finally, we are relying on the report by the home inspector from a government employee or the seller's property condition disclosure statement. So again, we were told, we were shown by a report and so on. So guys, very, very important. To avoid liability, not my monkey. You guys remember that? Not my monkey. Point the fingers as much as you can. My job is to see the house, and whatever I can see, I will talk about. Whatever I cannot see and I asked about it and the information was provided, then that's all I know. The seller told me. The seller even signed the property condition report. The inspector told me. They even gave me a report. So I washed my hands. I did my job, right? So our job is to do the best we can, right? But we don't have to investigate stuff that's out of our expertise. Simple as that. We talked about risk management. One of the ways to reduce liability is by having E&O or errors in emission insurance. You guys already know this. Okay. Conduct of business. We're on page 434. As far as conduct of business, we just talked about all this, the duties to the public, fiduciary duties, and so on. All right? We talked about all this stuff already. Under advertising, we have TILA and Regulation Z. Who can tell me what TILA is? Anyone? What is TILA about? Anybody? What is TILA about? This is chapter 17. We talked so much about it. It was even 2 days to cover chapter 17. It was 4 parts. TILA, Truth in Lending Act. Has to do with lending. Has to do with financing. Truth in Lending Act. All right, Yanitza wrote disclosed loan. Okay, getting there. Alexis wrote law that protects people who borrow money. Great. But what did it create? What was the requirement that it created? That something is disclosed. What must be disclosed according to the Truth in Lending Act? All right, Yanitza, you wrote disclosed loan, but what? Loan what? Something missing. Okay, Sam says terms, or Ophelia says loan costs. Truth in Lending Act. Costs. Lending. Costs. APR. APR is the true cost of borrowing money. You guys remember that? We can have 5% with Wells Fargo. We can have 5% with Bank of America. That's the basic interest. But that's not the APR. You guys remember in part 4 of chapter 17, we went over a CD, a closing disclosure. And in the first page, we had the basic interest, which was 3.875. But when we got to the last page, we had the APR, which is basic plus all other charges to carry the loan over 30 years, right? And the APR was 4.1 something, right? 125 or whatever. Okay, so we went from 3.8 to 4.1 as the true cost. That's the APR, annual percentage rate. It's not your interest. It's the interest plus the charges of carrying the loan. All right, so TILA, or Truth in Lending Act, forces lenders to disclose this true cost. Okay, and the other one was Regulation Z. What is Regulation Z all about? What is Regulation Z or Reg Z? So TILA is for the cost of the loan. Regulation Z was? Let me write something here. Maybe it will help. Sorry, my bad. My bad. I'm the one confusing it now. Sorry, these are all the same. It happens. It's a coffee. Still did not kick in. I'm sorry. So Regulation Z and TILA are the same, right? So the true costs. The next one we have is RESPA. So Regulation Z is all about the true costs of borrowing money, so APR, right? And here are, right, we talked about this, triggering terms. If you disclose some type of information, right? If you're specific about the information, you also have to disclose the APR, the terms, the percentage or down payment, so everything. So if you give, hey, pay only $1,500 for this house, once you give that piece of information, you have to give everything else. How did we figure out that it was $1,500? Who qualifies for this, right? If the terms are general or liberal terms, then we don't have to. So financing available, nothing specific, so I don't have to give extra disclosures. Negotiable terms, nothing specific, so we don't have to give extra disclosures and so on, right? We must include the words to a qualified buyer, APR and loan terms, disclosures, right? And the same thing if it's an oral TV ad, we must disclose everything as well. Okay, if you do referrals, you know you got to put it in writing. You guys already know this. Broker cooperation, guys. We're on page 436. Now, most states require you to cooperate with other brokers. So broker cooperation means if somebody, you're the listing agent, for instance, and somebody has a potential buyer, but they belong to a different agency, right? You are Remax, they are Weichert. You cannot reject them. You have to cooperate with other brokers. So, right here, brokers are required to cooperate with brokers from other firms and allow those brokers to show their listed property. A broker must list a property on an MLS within 48 hours of signing a listing agreement. So if you sign the agreement, the listing today, hey, seller, would you like to sell? Okay, great, sign right here. The moment they sign, you got 48 hours to put it on the MLS. So you have to work with other brokers. If If the seller does not want you to work with other brokers or cooperate with other brokers, then they must sign what's called a waiver of broker cooperation form. So it's pretty much the seller letting you know, hey, I understand that it might take longer for you to sell because you're not exposing the property to other brokers. It cannot even be on the MLS. This is the in-house, please don't show it to anyone. I really don't want to sell my property. I'm just giving it a try type of thing, right? I know that it will take longer. I know that probably will sell for less, right? But I still want you to show to only your agents and your potential buyers. That's it. Okay. Thanks, Danny. I appreciate it. All right. Discrimination law. So, Attorney General Memorandum. Attorney General Memorandum Against Discrimination. So, LAD, if you ever see it, is Law Against Discrimination. Okay, this is part of what's called fair housing. Okay, Attorney General Memorandum of Law Against Discrimination. And what it says is that you must provide, in order to prevent discrimination, you must provide a copy, requires you to provide a copy of the memorandum to each property owner when accepting the listing. If the property owner, if the seller says, I really don't care about that, I'm still going to show the property to whoever I want to show. I don't want this kind of people to come here and see the property, right? Or that kind of people. I only want my kind of people, right? The moment they do that, the moment they show potential discrimination, you must refuse the listing. All right? And it's tough. It's tough for a lot of you. Well, not a lot of you as individuals, but it's tough for a lot of you to deal with these situations because there's a lot of sellers and a lot of people, unfortunately, that have this stance, right? They still discriminate, right? And we've seen this more and more, unfortunately, over the past couple of months, over the past couple of years, but over the past couple of months has been ridiculous. More and more the discrimination point, right? So unfortunately, there are people out there that discriminate. So unfortunately, you are going to deal with a seller once in a while that says, nope, not this person. Nope, not that kind of person, right? Guys, I don't care what your stance is regarding discrimination. If you want to be licensed, you must refuse listings from people that do intend to discriminate. Okay? If you guys remember when we talked about fair housing, there's no dollar limit on the lawsuits. Hefty penalties, you could even lose your license, right? Do you really want to risk it? That's what you have to think. All right? Guys, we had a whole chapter on pricing the property. This is the next page. We had a whole chapter on pricing the property. What we do, right, this was chapter 16. What we do is a CMA, not an appraisal. Because who prepares the appraisal? An appraiser, right? So we do a CMA, not an appraisal. Okay? And we had a whole chapter, so that's why I'm going right through. Megan's Law, guys, simply means sex offenders, registered, convicted sex offenders. So if somebody was convicted of being a sex offender, they're going to be on the national registry, state, county, and municipality registry. This law started in New Jersey. Unfortunately, started in New Jersey. We're known for that. And it's about people that are sex offenders, but they've been convicted already. So one of the things that was disputed is what's called double jeopardy, right? We are already convicted. Now you have to announce to the public that we are sex offenders. That's like a double conviction, right? Double jeopardy. So what we have in the contracts and what we must disclose is that there's a potential, right, sex offender in the area. And there is everywhere. There's potential sex offenders anywhere. So New Jersey says we cannot provide information about registered sex offenders, right? We are required to inform buyers and tenants in writing where the information can be found. Okay? You got it? We cannot say, hey, next door there's a sex offender. We cannot do that. But if somebody asks, hey, do you know if there's any sex offender in the area? Well, there's a website you can go to. I cannot research that information, but there's a website you can go to, right? That website is njsp.org, NewJerseyStatePolice.org. Okay? Now, every contract, going back up, every contract, sales contract, and leases must include a Megan's Law statement, which says also the same thing. If you're interested, go right here and search for potential sex offender. What happens if you are already the agent when you show the property, the seller says, oh, okay, sorry, I didn't see that before. To limit liability, so what he's asking, guys, is let's say you're the agent, you represent the seller, right? You represent the seller and the seller did not express their discriminatory preferences, right? They did not express it. Later on, when you're showing the property, the seller says, no, I don't want this kind of person to see the property. All right, this is for everybody. Listen up, for everybody. The easiest way for you to reduce liability when you find out that your seller is hiding stuff or being discriminatory or whatever it might be, the easiest way to get out of it is literally getting out of it. Simple. Mr. Seller, I was not aware that you intend to discriminate. I did mention to you that we cannot discriminate, and I'm putting my license on the line. So it's either we show the property to everybody because everybody has an equal opportunity in housing, right? Or if you intend to discriminate, my broker and I will rescind this contract. We appreciate it, but we'll rescind the contract. So as soon as possible, get out of it. If it's a latent defect, as we talked about before, something hidden, the easiest way to reduce liability is as soon as you find out, you let the other party know. So, hey, buyer or buyer's agent, we just found out that there's a leak on the roof and the seller will fix it, but we're just letting you know. So the easiest way to reduce liability is to take immediate action. In case of discrimination or Megan's Law or anything like that, it's like take action right away of letting go, right? If it's based on a physical condition of the property, then disclose to the other party as soon as possible. Okay? And to finalize this chapter, prohibited activities. We have violations and penalties. Guys, we already covered all this. State of New Jersey has a specific list, even though it's commonly and widely known across the United States, but State of New Jersey put it in this act directly. Making false promises, substantial misrepresentation, representing more than one party in the same transaction without disclosure, flagrantly, continually making misrepresentations and false promises through agents, broker, salesperson, and so on, failing to account for money, being incompetent, and so on. So all these, guys, we talked about it yesterday, the day before, last week, and so on. All of these things. All right, so I want you to go to penalties on page 441, because this we didn't talk about yet in the state of New Jersey. Everything else is national, everybody knows. Let's go to penalties in New Jersey. All right, guys, just one quick second. I hope everybody's there already. All right, So penalties. Penalties. So if the commission deems that any of the foregoing violations of license law has occurred, it has the power to place your license on probation, suspend or revoke your license. You guys already know this, but this you do not know. They can impose a penalty of up to $5,000 for a first violation and go up to $10,000 for any subsequent violations. They can also deny you, this is a potential question, they can also deny you further issuance of the license. What does that mean? If you're a repeat offender, and repeat, for them, it's the third time, okay? Repeat offender, third time you violate, whether it's the same violation or another, you are unfit to have this license, okay? So repeat offender, you will never have your license again. Any questions? What's the $5,000 penalty for? If you violated any of these. So the whole list. Any of these, your first penalty. Any of these, Sam, your first penalty could be up to $5,000. Any of these. First penalty. It's a minimum of $250 and up to $5,000. Any questions, guys? Going once. Going twice. All right. So guys, we're going to end this session, then we're going to come back for chapter 28, very short chapter. A few things to go over there. So it's now 11:46. We'll be back by 11:46, so 11:47, 13 minutes. We'll be back by 12. Okay, so 13 minutes. We'll be back at 12, guys. YouTubers, I'm going to close this session, and I'll open one right after. See you guys in a bit.